Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of SO Live here every Monday, alongside my colleague and friend Ayman Khan. Ayman, how you doing, mate?
Yeah, not too bad at all. No amount of smoke or heat, as it is in the UK, can stop me from or make me duck out this week's obligations to come on to the pod. So happy to be here. How you doing, Danny?
Yeah, I'm good. Ducking is indeed the theme. I had a lot of fun with the pun-related headlines for this one, both on YouTube and on the screen. It won't be that good every week. I was going to ask producer Vinny to design a thumbnail that featured lots of ducks going around the perimeter as well, but I thought for such a small thumbnail, it probably wasn't worth the effort, although it wouldn't be me making it. But yeah, we thought this was a good jumping off point because there wasn't a big boxing show at the weekend, which we've kind of become accustomed to having one every week, or at least one, sometimes more, and that's certainly going to be the case for the rest of this month. But yeah, so we thought it'd be a good opportunity to talk about topical issues in boxing. And there's been a lot of back and forth about who's avoiding who between Tyson Fury and Oleksandr Usyk, which we will come to. But the big talking point over the last few days has been Frank Martin apparently deciding not to take up a fight that was verbally agreed, so we're told, with Shakur Stevenson, a world title fight. Stevenson, for a long time, him and his team have been saying he's much avoided in his own right. Seemed they'd finally found an opponent, a talented one at that, in Frank Martin. And then Top Rank, from what we've seen reported, have come back to Tom Brown and PBC and said he's changed his mind. It's purely an individual decision. I know Martin has since reacted on social media, as is the case for most fighters these days, I guess, and said, "I didn't duck shit," I think was the phrase. And there has been speculation maybe he's got something else lined up, although Shakur Stevenson himself kind of scoffed at that notion. We'll go to the comments in a minute because we are the most interactive live show on Boxing YouTube. So we want to hear what you guys think of the whole Stevenson-Martin situation and also ask us any questions you've got. But before we do, Ayman, what did you make of the news that Shakur had an opponent for about 24 hours?
I'm happy to hold off just for a moment because we haven't heard the details fully about the situation on who's ducking who and where the blame lies right now. But sticking specifically on a Shakur Stevenson perspective, not a great situation for him because right now with the fighters that he's linked to, with the fighters that are in his generation who are striving for greatness and are striving to assert themselves as the best of this generation or the next generation coming through, I should say, he's lacking opponents right now, and others are still keeping their names in the conscious of boxing's minds, boxing public's minds. So he's lacking that opponent, and he needs something big. Frank Martin wasn't quite that, either way you want to look at it, but still a very good opponent and a fight that people were looking forward to. Now that's dropped off, and the replacements are less than, in that sense, either below the consciousness of Frank Martin too. So he needed something big, and he's not been out this year. So he needed something, and he hasn't got it. So it's a difficult situation when the likes of Ryan Garcia's, Gervonta Davis's, Devin Haney's have been doing things this year, and he hasn't been doing anything at all.
Yeah, so we've got a few comments coming through now. JM84, he was very keen to get his comments read out. He was moaning at some of the other posters for knocking his thing up further along the scroll. But he says Tank versus Shakur would still be fun. But G-Money responds and says Tank is ducking the elite. He doesn't want to be great. I'm not sure that's fair. I think most people had the Ryan Garcia fight more competitive on paper than it turned out to be in the ring. It's an interesting one because Shakur has obviously tried to get or entice the bigger names in the ring. He's now got another world title, so there is something to gain from fighting him. But I think it's the manner in which he's won a lot of his fights probably puts people off because it's not just a case of do I have a chance of winning and then measure that up in a risk-reward scenario against how much money you're going to earn and where you'll go if you lose and so on. He's so dominant in these victories against seasoned campaigners that people are probably worried that they're not going to get many other opportunities afterwards. And as big a star as Shakur is at the moment, he's not quite at the elite level as a draw that they'll make life-changing money where they won't need to carry on their career at a higher level. So I can understand why he fails that risk-reward test, which is probably why they looked at people like Frank Martin's level, because he's someone who's got more to gain than lose, and he can come again. He's young, he's fresh. This, no disgrace in losing to Shakur Stevenson. But for whatever reason, he's decided against it. And as I said, there are rumours that he's got a different fight, which is possible. All these promoters fighting against each other for the same talent. It's a problem we've experienced a lot more recently in the UK. So maybe he does, and we don't want to be too harsh in case he comes out of a bigger money fight. But yeah, it is a strange one, and you have to feel for Shakur because he seemingly is ready to fight anyone.
No, yeah, you've pretty much summed it up in about as neat as well as I could as well. I just hope maybe there's opportunity for another fighter to come in and really take the opportunity that's presenting itself right now. Dos Santos, another fighter, which again, doesn't present itself as a real mouth-watering contest in when you look at it. But could the likes of someone maybe that we over on our side of the pond, we've been supporting and championing the likes of Maxi Hughes. Could he maybe be in the reckoning for a fight with Shakur Stevenson? That would be something that would kind of cross over to our side and get a bit more eyes on Shakur Stevenson to help his plight, especially with Maxi Hughes, who was for a lot of people robbed. They would say against George Kambosos. So it's again like a developing situation, but not again one which doesn't help Shakur Stevenson's cause in the grand scheme of things.
And continuing the short but worthy SO Live tradition of people taking the names of former notable heavyweights, Thomas Bonin, I don't know if people remember him from getting starched by David Haye in his heavyweight debut, but he said, losing to Shakur is bad for your brand. He'll make anyone look amateur. And then he follows up with Frank Martin is promoted by PBC as one of their most talented fighters, not worth the risk for them. Yeah, but it's been made very clear by Top Rank that it wasn't PBC that, changed their mind or pulled Martin out of the fight. They were happy to do business because I think they felt that what he was due to make and the profile he was due to get by fighting Stevenson was more that they could offer him in-house at the time. And they, Carl Moretti of Top Rank in a tweet, or might have been to Dan Raphael, I can't remember. But he made it very clear that PBC weren't the decision makers in this scenario. It was very much Frank Martin himself who changed his mind. Opiyemi asks, okay, we'll take a little detour, ask what are our thoughts on Dimitri Bivol against Lyndon Arthur. I'll let you take that one first, Ayman.
Look, it's not the most exciting fight in prospect either as well, too. Again, look, it's kind of been a bit of a trend for especially British light heavyweights to have a couple of fights, keep climbing the ladder a little bit, and then jump up into this big fight at world level and not have any sort of bridging fight. And again, can't begrudge that opportunity if you get it for someone like Lyndon Arthur. However, you'd feel like your best chances with the likes of Beterbiev and Bivol, who are aging, are to maybe hold off a little bit if you can, and then kind of strike for a world title opportunity, or hopefully, as an observer, wait for those two to fight, beat the lumps out of each other, and then go for one of the two, as you'd imagine maybe if the likes of Beterbiev become undisputed, they'll soon retire after that point. But look, from an Arthur perspective, a real big, from what we've seen of Arthur, a big proposition, a task ahead of him of Bivol, who's really just being someone who's a consummate boxer. He struggled a little bit against, what was it? It was Craig Richards, wasn't it? When he come over here to the UK,
yeah,
he had the fight, and Craig Richards maybe had an opportunity to strike and win the world title from him. But then, if you listen from a Bivol perspective, Bivol saying he kind of held back a little bit, and that got him the Canelo fight, and now he's really kind of showing what he's all about. And that version of Bivol against the likes of Lyndon Arthur, you'd feel that Lyndon's really kind of up against a massive task there too. But if he gets the opportunity, I guess as a fighter, I guess as a world title opportunity, you've got to take it, but not one where you can see very many routes to success for Lyndon Arthur, unfortunately. Especially when Lyndon Arthur's best attributes are to box. That's a problem for Lyndon.
Well, I agree. Just a quick bit of housekeeping on the chats. Make sure you do like, comment, and subscribe, please, while you're watching. Get your comments and questions in. We want interactivity to be a major part of this show, and we rely on you guys for that. JM84 says, what's Bivol doing? Is he avoiding Biev, or is it just because of the WBC ban on Russian fighters? Well, let's not ignore the fact that Beterbiev is Russian. I know the WBC seems to be ignoring that fact, but he is, despite being based in Canada for however much of the year. He is, a born and bred Russian, as is Bivol. So it does seem to be an unfair distinction without getting too much into the politics of it. And I think that is a big part of it for Bivol. If you were going to take what could be the riskiest fight of his career, probably a harder fight given the weight than Canelo was for Bivol, you'd want to know that the prize is worth it. And that means, he's already a world champion. So the next step for that is to become undisputed. I think that's one of the reasons why he was pushing for the Canelo rematch at 168 rather than 175. Even though that may have harmed him from a competitive aspect, he wanted the chance to become an undisputed champion because it's an accomplishment he hasn't yet attained. Now, to do that against Beterbiev, WBC would have to change their stance, or I guess the war in Ukraine would have to come to an end, which seems very unlikely anytime soon. I would say that's a major reason why it hasn't happened yet. I don't think Bivol is avoiding or ducking Beterbiev. I think if anyone's got the style to beat Beterbiev, it probably is Bivol. I'm not going to go out and say predict he's going to win the fight if it ever happens, but he's probably got the best chance of anyone out there. And Thomas Bonin says, do you think fighters' weight should be made public weeks before a fight so we know not to waste money, time on someone 42 pounds over the limit? I mean, there's certain issues there. Like if it's a WBC title fight, for example, or even a British title fight via the Board of Control, there will be check weights. You will have to make a certain weight limit 7 days before the fight, maybe 30 days before the fight, and so on and so forth. Sometimes with the WBC, especially, these are reported publicly. Sometimes they're not. But both organisations involved won't allow a fighter who's over that weight limit, however long out, to carry on with the fight because they don't want them to lose a certain amount of weight in a short time, even if it is possible. So that can happen, but obviously I'm guessing you're referring to Liam Smith's rematch with Chris Eubank Jr. There wasn't really a way around that because it wasn't a world title fight. It wasn't sanctioned by, for the British title or a world title. So there was no reason to do those check weighs necessarily, except for the fighter's own safety, which may have been done, but not to the extent where there was a rule in place and they could rule the fight off. But yeah, I completely agree. It would be good to see it in more fights. I think that's the chat for now. But yeah, just getting back to the ducking or not ducking issue. If you're Frank Martin, you've got to believe that he's got a real good reason for turning this offer down after agreeing to it in the first place. Because it's the sort of slur that will stay on your career stay on your reputation for the rest of your career. Even if it is an elite fight like Shakur Stevenson, as Ayman mentioned there, we've talked about Lyndon Arthur fighting Beterbiev, and you look at other world title opportunities that seem, difficult. Let's be honest, someone like Thompson going up against Jai Opetaia, for example, fights like that. If they avoided that fight, even though most people give them very little chance of winning, it would get called a duck. And I think rightly so, unless they're injured, because that's a huge opportunity for you. One that in some cases probably isn't deserved anyway and may not come around again. For Frank Martin, I imagine career highest payday. I imagine the most exposure he'll ever have had. So unless he's got a very good reason, this is something that could haunt him for the rest of his career.
Yeah, I agree, but I also kind of think like Top Rank have kind of got to look at their own home turf in the sense that the fight that was being talked about was Lomachenko or Shakur Stevenson and Lomachenko, and that fight never materialized in the first instance. That was the fight that was really kind of planned to do, and Lomachenko has his own reasons for that, mostly stemming from his major disappointment in the result of the Devin Haney fight. But that was the fight that they were looking for, and that's who I believe, from a Top Rank perspective, from a Shakur Stevenson perspective, really has kind of put them in this situation as a whole. So a not great situation for developing Shakur Stevenson, but I think the kind of real bigger problem here is getting that fight over the line than any fight with Frank Martin would do for Shakur Stevenson's career.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's a very difficult one, and until we find out more information about it, so the longer Frank Martin leaves it, just putting a one-line explanation on Twitter, the more people are going to be talking about him negatively. So if there is a reason, even if it's not been fully confirmed yet, even if they're just in talks, say something now. Put something out there, put a statement out, just saying, look, we're in talks for a much bigger fight. It makes more sense for me. We're going to see how that plays out. And if it doesn't work out, then I'll tell you what it was and you can all judge me then. But at the moment, the almost silence doesn't really help his case, I don't think. But yeah, let's move on to kind of the meat of it. And a lot of people, when we were waiting to come live about 20 minutes ago, were saying, how can this even be a question? It's obviously Tyson Fury's avoiding Usyk, not the other way around, etc., etc. But I think, we owe it to everyone watching and to ourselves to take, to try and look at both sides of the story and see if there is blame to be shared. So let's talk about that. Ayman, just first of all, when you see lots of people saying Tyson Fury's not just avoiding Usyk, but a lot of major contenders by going down the crossover route, what would you make of that?
I understand people's frustrations, especially because you have here a WBC heavyweight champion who is it's debatable for sure, but for a lot of people, I'd say the majority of people, when I read or put my finger on the pulse of the boxing consensus, they say that he is the number one in the heavyweight division ahead of Oleksandr Usyk. Certainly, he's held titles longer than Oleksandr Usyk. So he is the number one guy. He's the flag bearer of the division. The flag bearer of the division who's very vocal, is very outspoken, has an opportunity to fight this year, and the fight isn't against a legitimate boxer. Don't get me wrong, absolutely love the Francis Ngannou's story. I'd say not quite a casual UFC fan. I'm an intermediate UFC fan. Watched a bit of Francis Ngannou. Know he poses a danger. Doesn't pose a danger enough to really kind of pose any significant worry to someone of Tyson Fury's boxing ability. So I think this would be a more palatable if we were seeing Tyson, who would be fighting maybe 2-3 times a year, and we could say, all right, we've seen him fight a legitimate fight this year. He's going to have this in the middle, and then he's going to do the undisputed fight afterwards. And then you add into the mix as well the fact that when it comes to an undisputed fight, it's always kind of discussions. It's always kind of nearly there. It's always kind of something's happening, then something bigger gets in the way, and the fight's gone. And it's like boxing fans are given like, you can have some of this, you can have some of this. You're about to get it. And then it's ripped up, the carpet is ripped up from underneath and you're left with nothing. And in a year when we've had those big fights that we're looking for, and we're like, right, we're going to get the big one now. We're going to get the watermark fight for this generation. The undisputed heavyweight championship is going to be on the line. And it's gone again. That's what disappoints boxing fans. So then they point the finger at Tyson Fury and say, oh, so you're not fighting Usyk. You're fighting Francis Ngannou. You're fighting for the money. You're not gonna directly say it like that. So we're gonna jump in against you. We don't like you until you fight Oleksandr Usyk. So I get that feeling. It's not one that I purely subscribe to, but of the two fights, of course, I'll be looking for an Oleksandr Usyk fight over a Francis Ngannou fight.
Yeah.
But I do feel we'll get it. It's just not going to be this year, which is annoying. Which is why the boxing fans are annoyed.
We're going to go back to the comments in a minute, but Modfather Vinny, if you are listening to us, can you please just whack up a poll? Tyson Fury versus Oleksandr Usyk, who's ducking who? And just, binary choice and see what people decide. Maybe we can convert some people as they listen to our discussion. Thomas Bonin says, do you think Fury thinks his legacy is complete after the Wilder fights? Everything he's done since is money grabs. Is Dillian White a money grab? Is Chisora 3 a money grab? I mean, I didn't expect either of those to be the successes they were, but maybe him and Frank Warren saw something I didn't. That's why they're in the jobs they are. And also because, he can fight a bit. Warren, that is. But no, seriously, I don't know. I don't think from knowing Fury, the limited amount I do, that he's got a lot of time for legacy talk and for public perception generally. I think he's in it to do what makes him happy, what he sees as barometers of success for him. We saw in the interview he did last week with Radio Raheem on Seconds Out that he was saying, I've done this, I've done it, and he was listing everything. I've been in WWE, I've done a single with Robbie Williams, I've been on this, I've got a Netflix show, and I think he sees himself as a kind of multi-platform, multi-discipline superstar. I think that's what he sees as his legacy and public perception. I don't think he's that bothered about what the hardcore boxing fans think, which is strange because he grew up as a hardcore boxing fan and is a bit of a historian in his own right, and historian. So, yeah, it's an interesting change, but I think that Fury's faced a lot of criticism in his career, and a lot of it justified, don't get me wrong, but some of it not. And I think he's got that maybe slight chip on his shoulder. And I think now people hating him even for justified reasons, he's not going to be that bothered. I think he's making plenty of money. He's very recognisable and famous. And I think those things matter to him a bit more than the respect of a minority of hardcore boxing fans. Because I think casual fans have got plenty of respect for him. I think Anthony Joshua's helped that in a way by losing twice to Usyk. Because I think, while he's been losing, Fury's been winning and filling up stadiums. And to a casual eye or a casual perception, it looks like he's the number one attraction, doesn't it? And there is a case for him to be, although I think Canelo would have something to say about that on a global scale. The Suff says, surely nothing wrong with fighting for money. Yeah, I mean, I think Fury and to an extent Frank Warren as well have been quite open about the fact that they wouldn't use the term cash grab, but that it's a huge event. It'll open doors for them to work more in Saudi Arabia, which is where all the money is at the moment. And there is, it's supposed to be a crossover spectacle. It's supposed to make a lot of money. I don't say no one, but not too many people, even in the inner sanctum, are saying this is going to be a competitive fight. Ian Watson says, Andy Ruiz Jr. versus Luis Ortiz was a very competitive fight. Either of these two are very credible opponents. We'll get to Anthony Joshua's next move in a bit, Ian, but I think Andy Ruiz Jr. trilogy is being considered for that. So we will talk about that. But yeah, just getting back to Fury and Ngannou. Ayman, do you think in itself people are angry about the fight? Or is it more that Fury's not going to defend his title at all this year?
No, I don't think particularly people have any ill will towards the fight and ill will towards the feeling that, look, you're a boxer, you've got limited career, especially in the heavyweight division of all divisions when we're talking about this sort of idea. That when you're taking the biggest licks in the division, and let's not forget, Tyson Fury has taken the biggest lick you can take in this division, getting off of the canvas against Deontay Wilder. No one's going to begrudge you from making as much money as possible that you can make when the time is right. And that's what Tyson Fury is doing right now. That's what he's doing in WWE.
Ayman, sorry, I hate to interrupt you, and I will let you finish your point in a moment. But it's a bit of an historic moment for SO Live. We've got our first super chat. I can scarcely believe it.
Thank you for WM Boxing Views.
WM Boxing Views. I feel like I should read this out in a special accent or something. You paid for the privilege. Fury is hold on. Yeah, this is where it gets harder. Fury is a disgrace to UK boxing. Fury knows that Usyk is a very difficult fight and has priced himself out accordingly. Well, WM Boxing Views, I do not necessarily endorse that, but I do endorse the fact that you've paid to say it. Thank you very much. Ayman, back to you.
Yeah, look, I appreciate the contribution to WM Boxing Views, and I'll try to respond to that quickly. I'll just get my point off just then. Yeah, so I was just saying, look, Tyson Fury has taken the biggest licks in the division, so he's someone who's felt the dangers and the pitfalls and rose from those pitfalls in the division. When he's fought the likes of Deontay Wilder 3 times, no less, when other fighters in the division have talked about fighting Deontay Wilder and haven't fought Deontay Wilder. I think Fury is very savvy, a very savvy fighter who knows how to market himself as a businessman and not have the tag of being a businessman, and can point the tag of being a businessman to other fighters in the division too. Very key. But in terms of key decisions in his career, he's always been on the right path. He's always someone who's backed his boxing ability. And I think that's the key to the decision here, is that he thinks he's head and shoulders far above the rest of the competition. And for a lot of people, including myself, I think very much he is. He definitely is head and shoulders above a lot of the competition. We'll see what Oleksandr Usyk has to say to that. And he does have a big claim against that. But he was the one who was willing to go and put himself in the position against Vladimir Klitschko, was so confident he beat him resoundingly, barely even took a punch. Then had the stuff outside the ring, came back. No one wanted to face Deontay Wilder. He said, Deontay Wilder, I'll take you on. Got back into shape. For my eyes, beat Deontay Wilder, got a draw, got a rematch, beat him resounding the second time, beat him resounding the third time. He's happy to wait because he feels he's so good. He can wait. He can milk the money, then have the fights. Maybe let his opponents get a little bit older as well too, because time's on his side as well. That little bit helps too. But because he's so good, he can come back to it and he can beat him. That's what I think he's thinking, and that's if he's thinking that way, then he's well within his rights to do so. And it sounds like he's on the right path to, as he has been throughout his career.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. When Floyd Mayweather was in his pomp at 147 pounds, he wasn't fighting world beaters every time. You know, he had fights with the likes of Robert Guerrero, Andre Berto, Victor Ortiz. You know, they're good fighters, but they're not great fighters. They're not elite challenges for Mayweather. He didn't fight Pacquiao until years too late as well. And that's no slight on Mayweather. I happen to believe he would have beaten Pacquiao prime for prime. But the point is that he's a smart businessman. And I think a lot of people praised him for that, where they're quick to criticize Fury for the same thing. Perhaps because Fury's bluster maybe doesn't match his intentions. But then you could say the same about Mayweather. Just to make clear on the Super Chat front as well, we do endeavour to read out as many of your comments and questions as we can. The only difference with a Super Chat, which obviously you have to pay for, so not the only difference, I've already contradicted myself. But the other difference is that it will guarantee that your comment gets read out. Ace of Yunizwen, I'm sure how to say that, as you can tell. Fury is to blame. Anyone who thinks otherwise is stupid, plain and simple. Wow. I've been called all three in the past, to be fair, often in conjunction, so I'll take that. We'll talk about Usyk's side of it in a minute. JM84, did Usyk price himself out of rematch financials? Yes, he bloody did. We're going to talk about Usyk shortly. Brad's dad, say hi to Brad, dad. Says Saudi is to blame, not Fury or Usyk. It's common sense to let the fight marinate over a few months. It's a business. Well, it's been more than a few months already, Brad's dad. It's a business, not just a sport. The fight will 100% happen. Patience needed. Well, I was going to say they said that about Mayweather Pacquiao, but then it did eventually happen. The Surf says, I recall Fury making the offer to Usyk first. Yeah, so getting back to that, they had much documented negotiations earlier in the year. It seemed like it was on. Fury kept talking about deadlines. I don't think he helped negotiations by talking about them publicly or by setting arbitrary deadlines. But it seemed like behind the scenes, George Warren and Aegis Klimas and Alex Krasuk were getting something done. And then while it all seemed to be agreed, although I don't believe Fury ever completely agreed to donating the £1 million to Ukraine, although I think Frank Warren offered to cover that himself, Fury then asked for the rematch clause to be removed from the contract. And I think that was just, I don't think it was that specifically that the Usyk camp didn't like, but I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I think that they'd had enough by that point of being messed around. So, in a sense, to say Usyk walked away, that is technically true. You know, I think we've got a headline still on the channel from Krasuk just afterwards, an interview that I did. And he said there, we were the ones that walked away. So that's not under dispute, but it's why they walked away. It's like when people talk about pricing yourself out of a fight. It might be the other party that ultimately makes the decision to call off negotiations. But if you've asked for an amount that you know you're never going to get, effectively it's you playing that power hand. So there's an interesting one. And the other thing I'd say in Fury's defense is that when Oleksandr Usyk decided to sign, or his team decided to sign with Skills Challenge Promotions, which we've heard in recent reports is now not the power base in Saudi Arabia, perhaps, that it was thought to be, and it may actually be the Riyadh-based group that worked with Tyson Fury and Francis Ngannou and Frank Warren and so on to put on this fight. You know, maybe that was a mistake in hindsight. They were involved in helping set up the defense against Daniel Dubois. But that was supposed to be this big kind of route into the Saudi market. And I remember at the time, Fury and Warren making a big deal of it, saying, well, this is going to make it even harder to make the Fury fight now because they're both going to be with different groups in that region. And then they'll have to negotiate. It's just an added complication. And I thought maybe they're just using that as an excuse for when the negotiations break down the next time. But now, when we see the problems with Joshua and Wilder, which we're going to talk about shortly, maybe they had a point. Maybe signing with Skills Challenge Promotions made this fight less likely. So I think there is fault on both sides. I think it's not unfair to give Fury the lion's share of it because he's talked about it more publicly and he's said all the big things about how easy a fight it is. So then it makes it more risible when he seemingly doesn't want that fight. He's been quite open last week with Radio Raheem saying he's more interested in the glitz and the glamour and the big spectacles than he not as in big glasses, but the big events that are going on, rather than the traditional boxing matches, even if it involves Undisputed. I think he said publicly he doesn't care about Undisputed. I think there's probably a bit of creative license in that comment. But yeah, I mean, I think there is fault on both sides. What are you saying, Ayman?
No, I think what it is as well is like, also there's not an underlining of Tyson Fury saying or demanding that undisputed fight in this Ngannou build-up as well. It's kind of been, I think, a written journalist kind of said to me when I spoke to him on the phone and said that Fury did say to me he's definitely still interested in getting the undisputed fight over the line. So he does want it. There is the intention there. And boxing fans are kind of frustrated that line isn't being pushed out to us guys behind the cameras as well, to us reporters on the scene on a weekly. Fury kind of, when the cameras turn on, that undisputed talk kind of goes by the wayside. And because that's not being underlined by him, they're also thinking, all right, well, he doesn't care then. He absolutely doesn't care. So he's the more vocal one. We obviously see a lot less of Oleksandr Usyk than we do see of Tyson Fury. So it's much easier to point the finger at the person that we're seeing in front of us than the one who's been behind the scenes, and we get to see little clips of him training and demanding fights and such every so often. So it's a lot easier to kind of poke the finger at him than it is Tyson Fury. So, but again, he should, I guess, as well, just as much, he should also be keeping the idea of the undisputed fight in the rhetoric, in the sphere of this fight or exhibition, whatever it is, with Ngannou too. Just going back to WM Boxing Views' point as well, saying, the Usyk fight is very difficult and price himself out accordingly too. Well, the thing is as well, like an undisputed heavyweight fight, which doesn't roll on very regularly. What is this, like 20 plus years since an undisputed heavyweight champion, or at least a British one, whatever the statistic is. It's big when it comes to boxing, which is a niche sport. It very much is big news. When the biggest fights happen, we hit the papers, we hit the public consciousness, we hit the mainstream TV, we hit the big bucks. Only when the big fights happen, only when the Floyd Mayweather's take on Pacquiao or McGregor or whatever it is. And this is one of those type of fights that does cross over and does demand that big money and needs to be given that big money accordingly. Now you add in the Saudi side too, who there's no splits, there's no talk. You make your own deal, so you've got to maximize as much as possible. And for someone like Tyson Fury, who's been, like we've mentioned as well, like you mentioned about Rady Rahim speaking to him, saying singles, books, WWE, he feels that he's not been remunerated for the biggest fight in his career. That's a problem for him. I guess it's so hard to say when it's like, we don't get the full details. We don't really have an actual finger on the point of how much he is actually worth. So it's difficult to say what that actual line is for him to take a fight on his side. But clearly, it's not been met yet.
And talking of WM Boxing Views, he sent another chat. I think he's trying to test my quote from earlier saying you'll still get read out even if you don't pay. I said we try, but we'll let you have a buy one, get one free, as you did do our historic first super chat. He said, Eddie has said today on TalkSport that they will be speaking to Team Wilder tonight about potential Vegas fight. That would be amazing. And question for you both, how many Brits would travel? We'll be talking about this in more detail shortly. I'm not sure. I don't think AJ's proved to have a massive travelling fan base necessarily. I don't think there were a huge number of Brits that came over to New York for the first Andy Ruiz fight. And perhaps that's a good thing considering how it turned out. But Vegas is different, isn't it? I think you will get more people traveling because of the fun of being there for a week generally, and a big fight week in Las Vegas can't really be compared to. Thomas Bonin says purse inflation is a huge issue. Fighters wanting more money than they're worth, not taking risks to jeopardize that. We get poor fights on PPV to sustain these inflated purses. It's a very good point. Yeah, one that probably deserves to be explored in more detail, perhaps on a future episode. The stuff says, agree that Fury didn't help with negotiations. I reckon he did that to play mind games with Usyk and team. Games You Love says, most of the hate is bitter AJ fans that now buy Usyk posters. Fair enough. Maybe wear Usyk pajamas. Liam66 says, does competition exist in Saudi? Thought everything went through the royal family. That's kind of what's been reported, Liam, is that the royal family have diverted the bulk of their money that they're going to spend on boxing to the Riyadh-based promoters that work with Fury and Ngannou. and Frank Warren and so on, rather than Skills Challenge Promotions. So that's the idea, that the royal family have diverted their vast resources in a slightly different direction. Games You Love says Matchroom fanboys can't afford plane tickets. Not really. We're not into class shaming or wealth shaming here on SO Live. I'm not sure I could afford a plane ticket, just out of interest as well. So that'd have to be expensed in rapid succession. Yeah, I mean, it is a difficult one, but I think there is fault on both sides. I think the Saudi switch, because that's where the power lies in boxing at the moment in that region, and in that one particular family, as Liam 66 alluded to there, you are kind of working on their whims. You know, if they decide to give it to a favoured cousin or a favoured dignitary rather than the other one, it might not be a decision that has anything to do with boxing. And the fighters are just pawns who have to pay the price of that. And in not Fury's case, sorry, if in AJ's case, that could be quite a big price to pay if the Wilder fight falls by the wayside. Or even if it does end up in Las Vegas, I think he's going to make a lot less money than he would have if it was in Saudi. But yeah, let's talk about AJ, as he's come up a number of times already. So the most recent reports, obviously we just heard about what Eddie was saying on TalkSport. I didn't listen to that, but it seems in a similar vein to what I've seen on social media and when he's spoken to us at Seconds Out, is that progress on Wilder and AJ in Saudi has been very slow. Lots of reports of there not being the money and the location in place just yet, that the favoured promoters, as I said earlier, are a different group from Skills Challenge Promotions. We've yet to hear from anyone from that team, Amir Abdullah and so on, if that is the case or not. Clearly, they're exploring other venues, other countries for Joshua and Wilder. But I saw Eddie Hearn recently saying they were looking at other opponent possibilities, perhaps for the UK as well. And the two he mentioned were Andy Ruiz Jr. in what would be a trilogy fight. They're currently at one apiece. And Filip Hrgović, which seems crazy to me because he's next in line for the unified champion, Oleksandr Usyk, unless Usyk's got a definitive other plan or they've been told there's going to be step-aside money or anything like that. You know, maybe Hrgović feels, or maybe Eddie Hearn feels, that Hrgović can make more money against AJ than he will in a mandatory position for the IBF, because obviously there's a strict purse split for mandatory challengers. And Hearn does work with Hrgović as well, so it might be an easier fight to make with AJ, who is still a huge draw, of course. But Ayman, for me, I don't know if this is true for you, seeing either of those guys, and they're both very good fighters, but seeing either of them in with AJ instead of Wilder would now be a bit of a big anticlimax.
Another anticlimax to add to the anticlimaxes that we've had in so many junctures of this supposed anti-Joshua versus Deontay Wilder fantasy matchup that becomes increasingly more of a fantasy matchup as time passes on, because we've been here so many times previous. Another disappointing end to it all if we don't get the fight again. I'm filled with less confidence now, even more so now that the Saudis are supposedly out of the running for it and it being held in Las Vegas, because that means there's even less money on the table. So how are they able to agree when there's now less money on the table? Maybe that kind of clears things up, but still that doesn't quite kind of add up to me. But moving that to a side for a second, the likes of Andy Ruiz and Filip Hrgović as potential matches up for anti-Joshua towards the end of the year. First of all, big tick for anti-Joshua if he does do the third fight this year, because that was his mission statement. His mission statement was, I'm coming out these back-to-back defeats to Oleksandr Usyk. I tried to beat him. I couldn't do it. Now I want to rebuild, and I'm having 3 fights this year. And if he has that third fight this year, he's given and lived up to the promise that he made to deliver those 3 fights. And when he's not, for the last few years, delivered on having 3 fights. Not that he said he would, but he's been fighting 1 or 2 times a year. So massive big tick if that fight does go over the line against whoever. Andy Ruiz, Filip Hrgović. Let's cross out Filip Hrgović straight away, because I spoke to Filip Hrgović and he said specifically, under no terms, under no vagaries, he said, I am not stepping aside. You can offer me 100 million. It's not happening. I've waited. I'm frustrated. I'm fighting Usyk next. Not Tyson.
I want Eddie to offer him 100 million to test that theory, because he would definitely step aside for 100 million. Who wouldn't? But no,
yeah,
it's not going to happen.
He's probably very tongue-in-cheek there, but still, that's the point. That's his statement out there. I'm not moving aside. I want my world title fight against Oleksandr Usyk or whoever it is. But that's what he wants. So Hrgovic out of the equation. Andy Ruiz, look, there's history between the two of them, and in the way that the rematch went over in Saudi Arabia, it's an easy enough fight for Joshua if he chooses to fight that way again. Problem is, he can't really choose to fight that way again because Derek James' MO is to go and build back to being that destructive force of Joshua. So it presents more of a risk than it does the second time around. It poses the risk of the first fight, the first time around when we didn't believe there was a risk. So and of course, obviously, there's that history between the two. So it's a fight in which I think would bring up some intrigue, especially because you've got that American and Mexican kind of thing over, and if it happens over in Las Vegas too, you're in that kind of territory. One that I'm not particularly too buzzed about, but I think when the fight comes around, you start to build that buzz and anticipation of it again. So, yeah, I think it's an all right fight, but you're looking tricky when it comes to opponents for Anthony Joshua if this supposed fight with Deontay Wilder is to happen next year. You need some sort of in-between. And the problem is the in-betweens are not exciting in the heavyweight division because the in-between fights aren't great opponents. So a tricky situation. I think Andy Ruiz might be the best of the in-betweens that Joshua can get in lieu of a Wilder fight.
I mean, personally, if the Wilder fight can't be made, and it'd be very difficult to do this, but I'd like to see the Joyce-Zhang rematch winner in with AJ. I think that'd be a much more attractive fight, especially if Joyce wins. Games You Love says Wilder's been next for 7 years, and BG London in the same vein says I've been waiting for 6 years. So you haven't been waiting as long as Games You Love. So there you go. Jim McDonald has got a question. He's directed it only at Ames as well, which I feel a little bit insulted by, Jim. I've known you for a lot longer, but before I ask you the question though, Ayman, do you know who Jim McDonald is? Like looking at his profile picture, do you know who that is?
In terms of the man behind the mask, I've got a very clear idea as to who it is. He's a very prominent boxer.
No. But who's the mask? Who's the picture? Who's the avatar?
Someone from Coronation Street.
You're not sure, are you? That was more of a question than a statement. Is someone from Coronation Street in the past? See, this is the thing, Jim McDonald. Ayman doesn't even know who you're supposed to be, and you're asking questions to him instead of me. Disgusted. Having said that, Ayman, what's next for Dave Allen?
Well, Jim is up to his usual tricks. I think next up for Dave Allen is to be coaching his prospects, including Stevie Lieber, to win a European title over in Poland. So I think he's gearing up to that. In terms of in-ring, I think he's going to take a bit of rest and maybe look to go again in the new year, probably for Dave Allen. So don't know quite yet, but I think he seems to want to have another potential outing in the ring into 2024. Feels weird talking about 2024, doesn't it? But the route to fights are still there for Dave Allen, I feel. And thank you to that specific Boxing Asylum member as well, too.
And BG London says Bill Gates wouldn't step aside for 100 million. Yeah. I hear he already has. That's why he's not fighting the Elon Musk Zuckerberg winner, isn't it? Liam66 says, are Craig Richards and Felix Cash sitting out bans? Oh, shadow bans. Not as far as I know, but I am visiting Tony Sims's gym on Wednesday. So if there's any fire to be found around that smoke, I'll let you know.
I don't think that's the thing, Danny. I mean, I saw this on Twitter yesterday, and it was like, because of the whole Conor Benn thing, it's the easy thing to do. It's the easy thing to do, and point the finger at the whole gym, which people do. And there's enough of it's enough for loose, enough tenuous kind of nature to do that. So I do get that, but fighters have been out from that gym since. Look at John Ryder. John Ryder in one of the most high profile fights you can get.
Joe Cordina's fight's just been announced.
Joe Cordina, exactly. So, I think it's more situation specific, and especially with Felix Cash as well, which the rumor is that he's left that gym to join another gym. That's his news to announce. So I think it's just really fighter specific as opposed to.
I think it might have already been inadvertently revealed that he's joined. I mean, I'm going to reveal it now anyway. He's joined Mark Tibbs' gym, as far as I'm aware, and I think Jimmy Tibbs revealed that in an interview with us, probably by accident. But I think it has been speculated at least that he's now joined that gym. So yeah, I don't think they're serving shadow bans at all. I can't see them doing that. And like you said, I think, if we are saying it's to do with, I don't know, either food, diet, supplementation, anything along that lines, Tony Sims doesn't organise that himself. So I'm not sure that's true. But again, we'll see. I'm sure if there's even an inkling of anything like that, I will, get offered it while I'm there, see if it does any good for me. No, I'm joking. I'm sure it's all innocent. A lot of talk about Dave Allen now. They've all jumped on the Jim McDonald bandwagon. Games you love asks, Anthony Yard next fight been announced. Isn't he on the Joyce Zhang show? I have to double check that, but I think he is.
Against Ricky Summers.
Ricky Summers, yeah. Digger will come to give it a really good go. I don't think it'll be like a 2-round job or anything. I think it'll give him a pretty tough fight. It'll be in his face. I think it'll be good to watch. I'm not backing Summers to win necessarily, although he's a really good guy and it'd be but then so's Yard. Like two of the nicest people in boxing actually fighting each other in that one. Ian Watson says, I thought that Dave Allen was working his way into the fight with Fraser. He was being hit with successive low blows and he evaded a lot of the direct shots. To be fair, the low blows were direct. They were just direct into the ball sack, some of them. But they were very direct. I think some of them were legal, some of them weren't. And I think Dave was definitely making the most of some of the ones that were legal as well as the ones that weren't. Whether he was working his way into the fight or not, I don't know, because it was only a 10-rounder and he was losing most of the rounds. So I don't know. Unless he was planning to stop Clark late, maybe that was the plan. But we'll never know now, I guess. Games You Love asks for the winner of Buatsi Aziz. Ayman, you can go first.
Winner of Buatsi Aziz. Look, you'd have to favour Joshua Buatsi, the Olympic pedigree, the fights that he's been in so far in his career. Dan Aziz is a little bit older than Joshua, if I'm remembering correctly as well too. Then Dan, if I remember as well too. Look, Dan has to take a lot of credit, and if he wins this fight as well, he has to be pushed as one of the main, if not one of the prominent jewels in a boxer crown as well too, because he's been the boxer guy. They've signed him, and at every opportunity he's succeeded. He's taken the mantle and taken the fights and really kind of pushed himself to the forefront in the light heavyweight division, where a lot of fighters have made moves, like I've said, to jump. Dan Aziz has taken each incremental step the way the traditionalist boxing fans want to see a fighter take their step. Not to say that either the other fighters are bad for doing that. You do what you want to do. I completely get those things that other fighters have done. But Dan Aziz has gone about it the quote unquote the right way. And if he beats Buatsi, it would be an upset. It's no two ways about it. But I would be favouring Joshua Buatsi to have more skills, and I've seen someone the likes of what Dan Aziz brings to the ring and dealt with that beforehand as well. I think that the fight that I'd be looking at is Buatsi versus Kalic, which was a real a bit of adversity that Joshua Buatsi fought. He had the bruised up eye. He was taking big heavy leather from Kalic, and then later on in the fight, it was able to overcome that, and I think he got the stoppage against Kalic. So that's what kind of gives me the favour to say that Buatsi can deal with what is the heat that Aziz is going to bring to him. But we'll see. He's got to deal with it.
Yeah, I mean, falls to pick, I think I'd probably go with Aziz. I think it'll be a significant underdog with the bookmakers, but I just think he's got the momentum on his side. He's definitely fought at a lower level than Buatsi has, but Buatsi's been hovering around that fringe world level for a few years now. Should have had a world title shot long ago. And you wonder if his prime, both physically and mentally, is starting to wither on the vine a little bit. Whereas Aziz has been busy. He's been getting confidence through every fight he's had, winning titles at a lower level. And this could be just the kind of meeting at the crossroads for him. And I think he might be able to get the job done. I don't say it with massive confidence, but if I had to pick, I think I'd probably go for Aziz. What else have we got here? Can we just get a prediction for Charlo Canelo? I'm excited for that fight. That's Jam 84. What are we saying? I think Canelo. I mean, I just think he's too big, too strong, to paraphrase Carl Froch. I'm sure he'd love that. And yeah, I mean, I think Charlo's very talented. But I think it's a bit like when Kell Brook stepped up 2 weight classes to fight Golovkin. 1 weight class probably would have suited him really well. You know, Charlo's tall, he's rangy, carries a dig. I think just going up one weight would have been, a good fit for him. But going up 2 against Canelo, who's very, very solid, physically strong, takes a really good shot, I think that takes away a lot of Charlo's advantages in the fight. So I'm backing Canelo quite strongly for that one. Ayman?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think in terms of the way the fight will play out, I think it will be a type of fight where Canelo's quite reserved in the initial kind of start of the fight, and then he'll allow Charlo to kind of. It'll be a fight where I think Charlo's winning the rounds in the first 4 or 5 rounds, picking up the shots and points, whilst Canelo's kind of allowing Charlo to empty that gas sack. And what Canelo will do is come on strong mid to late and eventually stop Charlo towards the end of the fight. That's how I see it going. It'll be a tremendous effort from Jamel. If I'm correct, yeah, it is Jamel.
Jamel. Potato.
Yeah, it's not Jamal Knight. But yeah, no, I think eventually Canelo will get to him.
Yeah, I think we can agree on that one. Right, we're going to round up soon, but let's, Mod Father Vinny, if you can hear me, can you close the poll for us and we'll have a look at the results? I think it's a bit closer than we were expecting, to be honest, in terms of who is to blame. Who's ducking who out of Fury and Usyk? 62% Fury as the big mother ducker, and Usyk 37%. Wow. What do we think of that? I mean, that's closer than I thought.
Yeah, it started off very clear as people thinking that Tyson Fury was ducking him. Then we had a discussion. Maybe we've kind of shortened the kind of, not that we're pro anyone, by the way, but just in terms of what we presented in terms of our discussions, maybe shortened it. I'd like to know why. If you've made your vote in the chat, tell me why you think Tyson Fury, why you think Oleksandr Usyk. But it's clear to me that, and this is the way I feel about it as well, having been speaking to people and interviewing people as well. Russ Amber is someone who sticks in the mind, someone who's kind of seen it and done it. It's like, if you want a fight to get made, if you really want the fight from both sides, it gets made, and that's the bottom line of it. So I think there's a proportionate blame for both camps to that we're not seeing the fight, and that's the issue. That's the problem. So really, the poll is in a sort of way. I know I'm hating on my own poll, a little bit redundant, because both fighters should be getting a vote each here as to why and who takes the blame for the fight not happening.
I mean, if this was WWE and he wanted the 2 main champions to fight each other, it'd happen, wouldn't it? It'd happen. There's no excuse. I'm being facetious. But yeah, maybe that's what we need to do. Get some writers in, predetermine Fury Usyk. Maybe they can win one each, get their win back, and then everyone goes home happy. Just don't tell anyone about it while you're negotiating it, would be the watchword there. But yeah, so 62-37%, much closer than I thought. Maybe a bit of fuel for Fury fans' fire there. That wasn't easy to say. And yeah, we still hope it gets made, just as we hope Joshua against Wilder comes together, whether it's Saudi or somewhere else. Ayman, any closing remarks?
I was just going to offer you a question, maybe a question to the chat too. What are you more confident in getting over the line? Joshua versus Wilder or Fury versus Usyk?
Joshua versus Wilder.
Why?
Definitely Joshua Wilder. Because they've got few other options compared to Usyk and Fury. So Usyk can go on, he won't make as much money, but he can go on defending his belts. He will never struggle for fights because he will have all the mandatory obligations put upon him. So he can make decent sized fights. You know, he got, $6 million, was it, for Daniel Dubois? I mean, that's not bad money for the fight. Obviously, probably didn't expect Dubois to do what he did in the 5th round, but, it's pretty good money for what it is. And he can have 3 of those fights and make almost as much as he'd make against Fury. So he's got that. Fury's got so many other avenues, as he's always telling us. He'll fight in Ngannou, make an absolute mint. He could go back to WWE for a short time, make money there. TV, Netflix, blah, blah, blah. Singing with Robbie Williams, something I wouldn't recommend. Not a big fan of Robbie. But, if he's happy and he's making money, good for him. But it's just that there's so many other ways they can make money without fighting each other. And the moment one of them loses, they have no belts, they're no longer unbeaten, and they've lost to their biggest rival. So their value commercially will drop exponentially after that. So you can see why they're not super keen to take the risk, apparently. Whereas Joshua Wilder, it'd be a struggle for Joshua to come back if it's a punishing defeat against Wilder, coming off the back of those 2 Usyk losses as well. But you could probably think as the big draw that he is, there'd be at least be a rematch with Wilder. There'd be other things they could do, especially if he was like winning the fight and then just got knocked out with one shot. There's a case to be made there for a return. Wilder's always going to get fights because of his style and his power. You know, he's dangerous for as long as he's standing up. So he's not going to struggle either for money in the future. So I think they've got other options as well, but not as many as Fury and Usyk. And I think the demand for a Wilder Joshua fight may be bigger in a sense as well, in that they're both exciting fighters, both big punchers, both good finishers. I think most people would expect Fury Usyk to be more of a chess match. So yeah, if I had to pick one that's like, and also it's come closer to getting over the line than Fury Usyk so far, so that gives me a bit of hope.
See, I'd offer the alternative. Well, I do concur with you in the sense that I'm not also a big fan of Robbie Williams. I can definitely leave Robbie Williams off the table if Robbie Williams is presented as an option. But just in terms
I don't want to rock DJ.
Yeah, for sure. But no, like what for me, I'm very much fatigued by the fact that Joshua Wilder has been apparently so close for so many times, so many different, like we're going all the way back to like 2017 when the fight was originally spoke about, and we saw the videos of Eddie Hearn going and speaking about, you know, do you know who Deontay Wilder is, and back and forth, all that sort of stuff. All that sort of stuff is washed again to the point where if they're walking, wake me up when they're walking to the ring. That's where I am with the Deontay Wilder and Anthony Joshua, a potential fight between those two. Fury versus Usyk. I don't doubt that either of the quartet of fighters do want to fight each other, but I just feel like an undisputed fight, undisputed is their goal. The goal for both Tyson Fury and Oleksandr Usyk is to get that status, and I think they do want it. I just think the money is clearly, obviously, an issue here. Eventually, that will get sorted. Eventually, the two will meet. Eventually, there'll be no road, no other avenue to go down other than each other. I think that's why the fight will happen. I do think Fury wants it as much as he doesn't say it sometimes. Oleksandr Usyk definitely wants it as much as he does say it as well too. So I'm maybe holding out more hope that it goes over the line, whereas the hope of Joshua versus Wilder is very much depleted after being down that road beforehand.
JM84 says Danny's loving Angels instead. Brilliant. Sit away. Oh God. It makes you get, what is it the young people say? It gives me the ick.
That's right.
Black Attack Squadron says, did I miss the Martin versus Stevenson discussion? Yeah, you did. But luckily it'll be on playback, so you'll be able to watch it. We basically said we don't know the full details yet, but you know, Martin better have a very good excuse because the reward seems to at least match the risk in that case. The stuff says, why all the Robbie hate? And as JM84 says, why the hell not? I mean, just put on a few of his albums, or at least even a couple of singles will do it. I'm sure you'll work it out. Games You Love says, Wilder AJ talk is just boring now. We're about to finish the episode, you know. Sorry. We thought people would be interested. As we said, there was no big fight the weekend just gone. So we'll try and do better next week. What's coming up next weekend? Is there anything there we can talk about? Frank Warren's got a show on, hasn't he?
No, this weekend, no. It's been moved, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, it has. You're right. That was the one with, is it Ellis Zorro?
That's right. Yeah, it was headlined by Masood Abdullah and Mark Leach, I believe it was.
Yeah, and that's been moved to next month.
That's right, yeah.
Oh, so another non-boxing weekend. There's loads of small hall shows, I should say, before people get upset, but not many TV shows going on, so we'll have to wait for those. But the end of September is absolutely jam-packed with fights, including the Zhang Joyce rematch, which I'm really looking forward to. Is Lee Wood Warrington this month, or is it next month?
I think it's next month, Danny.
That's a cracker as well. Got some really good fights coming up in the UK. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. All right, well, thank you all for tuning in. Like, comment, and subscribe. And especially for our very first super chat, hopefully the first of many, you know. These the luxurious surroundings you can see in mine and Ayman's background don't pay for themselves. So you've got to keep us in the style we've become accustomed to, or better, ideally. But yeah, really appreciate it. Yeah. Really appreciate you all tuning in, and we'll be back next Monday, hopefully at 5 p.m. with the next edition of SO Live. Ayman, you can have the last word or sentence or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Make sure to keep tuned to Seconds Out. Much more boxing content coming your way. We have myself, Danny, on working this week, working away as we usually are each week. Mr. 9 to 5, Mr. Everyday, Mr. No Days Off between us two. We also have Radio Raheem in the UK as well too, working on some big content coming up. So make sure you keep tuned 2 seconds out for that big content, keeping abreast of everything as we're geared towards a big fight. Most notably, that big rematch against Joyce and, well, I should say Zhang and Joyce. He's earned that right. Zhang and Joyce too this month. So make sure you keep tuned to Seconds Out. If you haven't already, click that like button, comment and subscribe, and we'll very much see you, hopefully, especially WM Boxing Views. We'll see you toasting to that $4.99 on the next one.
Great stuff. That we'll share a drink. Good stuff.
That's right.
All right. Cheers, guys. Take care.